The busy news day continues in the NHL. We now have confirmation on a mammoth extension for Avalanche star Nathan MacKinnon, who will now become the game's highest paid player when his contract kicks in. We'll discuss this deal coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some more pretty substantial news here in the NHL. Starting next season, the NHL will now have a new highest paid player, and that will be Avalanche star Nathan MacKinnon. Of course, MacKinnon's entering the final year of his contract. We knew that the two sides were negotiating on a pretty substantial long-term deal to keep him in Avalanche for hopefully the remainder of his career, or at least the bulk of it. And that now is completed. We know MacKinnon wanted this deal done before the season got started, so there was no distractions. And he even said if it wasn't done, they may have to stop talking and put it off until the end of the year. But that's something that neither side really wanted to do. But here are the details. Of course, he gets the maximum term, 8 years, valued at just over $100 million, to give him an average annual value of $12.6 million per season. So that eclipses the McDavid number by a little bit and makes MacKinnon the new highest paid player. Now, of course, he does get a full and complete no move, no trade clause throughout the duration of the contract, and it's actually been also amended and backdated to include the upcoming current season. You can do that. Once you're eligible to have that kind of clause in your contract, you can have it backdated into the final year of your deal if the negotiations are completed and deals reached, like this kind of deal is with the final year about to begin once you're eligible for that extension. So he gets full no trade protection. Obviously, you certainly expect that a player of his caliber. That's what those kind of clauses are there for. I think some teams sometimes give them out a little bit too freely. I think those types of things should be reserved for the game's most elite, highest impact players, and MacKinnon certainly falls into that category. Of course, winning the Stanley Cup this past season certainly helped his case here for this new contract. The bulk of this contract, too, is going to be paid out in the form of signing bonuses. He's, like I said, $100.8 million is the total value of the contract, and $85 million of it will be paid out via signing bonus. Look at the breakdown here from Cap Friendly. The first 3 seasons alone, he's getting over $15 million in signing bonus per season, with his salary being quite small. But by the time you get to the halfway point of this contract, he's going to have a lot of money paid out with the final years, having his salary dip under $9 million. So, of course, some of you may be, concerned over the value of this contract. Will this inhibit the Avalanche from remaining in a competitive, potential cup-winning mode with their cap situation once this kicks in? And I really don't think it will. I mean, first of all, you got to look at the fact that we're probably looking at 1 or to 2 seasons before we see a substantial increase in the salary cap. If it wasn't for COVID, we would have had more of those by now, which teams were planning for. But certainly it's expected that probably after 2 more seasons, which would only be, after the first year is completed in this deal, they should see a big substantial increase in cap, which could be possibly as much as like $9 million. So that's a lot of extra wiggle room here. We know that for the coming season, they have a good team on paper. They're in a decent situation like many teams. There's not much wiggle room, of course, but still, they're in a good spot to be able to compete and hopefully have a good chance at least at retaining their championship. We know how difficult it is to win back-to-back or back-to-back-to-back Stanley Cups, as we saw the Lightning try to complete this past offseason. It came awfully darn close, but I would suspect that MacKinnon will remain the highest paid player for at least a little while, but I don't think it's going to be for as long as we've seen McDavid have that title. I think when we get more players coming up for negotiations, we know that Austin Matthews is eligible for an extension in 1 year's time, so he has 2 years left on his contract. I would suspect his number is going to be, assuming he continues to play at the level he has been, if he continues to pop 50, 60 goals a year, I would suspect that his number is going to be upwards around MacKinnon, or maybe even more. He might eclipse him. It's hard to say. And there's some other young stars that are going to be up there in that neighborhood as well. Of course, when McDavid's deal does eventually come back around for negotiation, or even Draisaitl, you got to think that they'll be upwards in that upper echelon as well. But for right now, Nathan MacKinnon breaks an NHL record for the highest paid player, the biggest value contract. biggest AAV per season at $12.6 million starting next year. So the Avalanche have their star player. Of course, they already have guys like Landeskog, who just did a deal a year ago. Makar's on a fairly long-term deal. Rantanen's on a longer-term deal. They have the bulk of their core guys that are still young enough that they can build around them and give them a good supporting cast. This team should be competitive and a consistent playoff team, and if not, a potential cup contender for quite a long time. But we'll see what happens here as this impacts the rest of the game and the other contracts that are coming due in the next few years. But certainly let me know your thoughts on this contract for Nathan MacKinnon. I honestly think he's worth every cent. He's been a tremendous player for the Avalanche. And like I said, by the time this kicks in, I'm sure you're going to see Nathan MacKinnon continue to produce at a very high level. And by the time it really gets into about the year 2 or so, we should see a pretty substantial increase in the salary cap, which would kind of determine why we see more deals like this, which will kind of make it a little bit more reasonable, I think, at that point in time. But let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk about it in the comments. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.